I want to start by just talking to you a little bit about the reinvestment fund, why we built PolicyMap, who uses it, and then dive deeper and show you how the city of Philadelphia is really incorporating this kind of data into its land banking program, its choice neighborhood program, its consolidated planning efforts. And it's really, we have many governments using PolicyMap, but what Philadelphia is doing is probably the most robust and integrated use of the application to date. So I wanted to show that to you. So the Reinvestment Fund is a community development financial institution. I think many of you are familiar with that. It's a CDFI. It's been around for 30 years. It's based in Philadelphia, and it has 4 divisions. The core one, the big one, is its lending arm. It has been lending in the Mid-Atlantic region for 30 years, mostly in affordable housing, and then over time it has started to get big into grocery stores in urban markets where banks would not go to put in a Pathmark. We started to do daycare centers, other kinds of facility lending, some small business lending. We also have a real estate development arm, which actually, mostly in Baltimore, assembles parcels of land, builds houses, and then sells them to low-income and moderate families. Policy Solutions, which is where I worked at the Reinvestment Fund, started to look at both where we were making investments over time, and we got heavy into the use of mapping, paper maps, as well as what kind of impact are we having in places where we say have done a lot of rental investments? How have we changed the markets in which we are working? And it was a lot of that work in Policy Solutions that really birthed the creation of PolicyMap. So I have some stories that I always share about what prompted the birth of PolicyMap. One of them is we had a large contract with the state of Pennsylvania where we went out and we collected all kinds of data. They wanted housing price data, they wanted land use data, they wanted zoning data, they wanted foreclosure data, they wanted income data. They wanted to see all of that data in combination with where they had made investments. They wanted to know how the demographics of the population were changing. And so it was a few $100,000 project. We built this tool for them. We got into Ira Goldstein, he runs Policy Solutions, overheated car, and we drive from Philadelphia to the capital of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg. And we, like today, we do a demonstration of all the data that we have. And the technology at that time, this is like 2006, 2005, everybody's using ArcView desktop software. And at the end of it, I handed this person a disk that had all the data on it. And when we got back into Ira's overheated car, I said, no one is going to put that disk in their computer. Because they not only had to put the disk in the computer, it had to be on a computer that had this expensive software. And then they had to have training in order to be able to do something with the maps. And they weren't shareable. And that was sort of the first thought in that car where I thought, you know, we should just do this, put it online, and there's some efficiency. Instead of just collecting it for Pennsylvania, there's some data, it's available nationally. Just collect it and clean it for the nation and load it into something that is more accessible than just on that stupid disk. Similarly, when we were working with the city of Philadelphia, we were gathered in the mayor's conference room, and there are 3 housing agencies in the city of Philadelphia, in addition to the Public Housing Authority. We had L&I, we had the police department, and they had all sent us their data on spreadsheets, where they'd made investments over time, what the crime rates looked like. And we put those spreadsheets again onto the disk that could be read by the mapping software. And we had this meeting and we showed them maps and we went to different neighborhoods and they were like, why are we all doing this in Strawberry Mansion? Why are we all on top of each other? And why are there other parts of the city where no one's doing anything? There was a lack of coordination, and this was 2006. It still exists today, even with the advance in technology. And that's where we've been working very hard to help that communication happen. So those are some of the things that sort of birthed the idea of PolicyMap. I was able to go to the Reinvestment Fund board and they gave us the seed money to get started. We've had help from other foundations over time as we built this. And now we have a business model that allows for the sales of site licenses to universities like Harvard. So Any student or professor that's there can go in and get in. We have over almost 60 universities at this point that have bought licenses to PolicyMap, and that's helping us to become a self-sustaining nonprofit effort, which is really exciting. So what we learned, both from our experiences at the Reinvestment Fund and other experiences that others had, is basically that government at all levels, federal, state, and local, they are looking for data for three very specific reasons. The first is they want to understand the markets in which they work, right? And these can be called market studies or needs assessments. They have to do them for HUD. They have to do them when they're doing a grant application to a federal agency. They need to be able to communicate what a neighborhood looks like and how it's changing in order to seek funding or think about what's going on in a place. They need to think about investments going forward, and this is particularly in light of really scarce resources. No city has enough money to do everything that it wants to do. So in terms of place-based activities, to sort of think strategically about where can I spend my limited resources, having access, easy, simple access to data becomes crucial. And the third, and this is probably the area where they're not moving as quickly as the first two, is to start to evaluate the impact, understand change over time in places where they have made investments. And that can be difficult, right? There's a lot of other factors that can come into play into how a neighborhood does that have nothing to do. It could be despite the city's actions in that area, the place has improved. We've done some work for HUD as it thinks about its neighborhood stabilization program. They're very interested to know in places where we spent money, where we invested, did those markets improve? And so we did sort of a quick and dirty analysis to look at those markets compared to markets that were very similar at the beginning of the NSP program, but were never touched by NSP. And to say, did this place trend better over time than these other similar markets that we didn't touch? And we've been doing that quarterly for HUD. We'll be doing it for another year of these quarterly analysis, and that's been interesting. But I would say for the most part, this impact evaluation has not taken off in the same way that the other two have. The problem, however, right, is that collecting data is complex, right? You can't just download the data from the census and then have it and do something. You have to be able to clean it, to normalize it, to put it in its software application where you can start to, in terms of mapping anyway, visualize the data. So it's both the data collection and the software makes it an obstacle to really being able to incorporate data in your work. And so our approach here was that we set out to try and create the largest library online of what we thought was reliable, authoritative, normalized, place-based data. And by place-based, I just mean geographic data. You have to be able to map it. And make it available through a familiar interface. It needed to be something that didn't require extensive training, and we've worked a lot on our user interface. We still have a way to go because there's a lot of complexity in there, but we wanted to make it, and I say this all the time and people laugh, it's like, people shop all the time on the internet. They make a few clicks and they're able to make a specific purchase. This should be that simple, right? And that is something that is part of our mission and something that we continually try and improve upon. And then our business goal as a nonprofit, if you can have a business goal, is that we want to do as much as we can for the public for free. And then we also want to have a self-sustaining business model. So much of what we offer in PolicyMap is available to the public for free, and then we have other things that sort of sit behind the paywall, and those things are how we've started to become self-supporting. Just a little more detail on the problem. Mapping data is difficult for non-GIS users. GIS is the Geographic Information Specialist, who has historically been the map maker for many cities, many organizations. Unless you have that skill set, mapping data can be difficult. You need to find the software, then you have to find the data, you have to know how to put the data on the map. And if you're a local government, that data is coming from multiple sources, and not every agency in a city has the same infrastructure set up. There's some, like your tax department, likely has a really good infrastructure set up for data collection, but your housing office, your L&I, they may not. Some of it is still sitting in Excel spreadsheets.